Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever found yourself stuck in a loop, a destructive habit, maybe persistent procrastination, or explosive anger, even people pleasing, you've probably gotten pretty harsh with yourself. We tend to look at these patterns and just label them failures of character. We look in the mirror and think, why do I keep doing this? I know it's bad.
And that internal judgment, that self-criticism,
Yeah.
that's exactly what we want to start dismantling today. Our whole mission here is based on this really transformative idea
Yeah.
that these behaviors we see as bad or maladaptive, they're often actually desperate and sometimes quite successful attempts by a part of us, let's call it an internal protector, that's just trying to help us survive or avoid pain.
Okay, so we're flipping the script.
Yeah.
Moving away from judging ourselves
Right.
and more towards curiosity, trying to understand the good intention behind it all, even if the outcome is destructive.
Exactly. What's the underlying need driving it? So we've pulled together material from all sorts of places: cutting-edge trauma research, classic behavioral science, cognitive psych, even philosophy, Skinner, Festinger, polyvagal theory, Jung.
Wow, quite the mix.
Yeah, the goal is to build the kind of blueprint,
Yeah.
how these internal defense systems get locked in, and crucially, how you can start to negotiate a healthier, more adaptive role for them in your own life.
This understanding that maybe your psyche is running some powerful but maybe outdated software, like a defense program based on threats that aren't really there anymore.
Precisely. And the key is meeting that part of yourself with respect,
Yeah.
not with scorn.
Okay, let's dive in. Where do we start? How do these protectors even get formed in the first place? What installs this defensive coding?
Well, to really get the origin story of the protector, we kind of have to look at basic behavioral conditioning first.
Yeah.
B.F. Skinner's work is key here. He suggested that our behavior isn't driven by some, mysterious inner self, but it's largely shaped by the consequences and structures in our environment.
Right, behaviorism 101. But if it's just about consequences, why do we develop these habits that clearly harm us later on? Where does that protective, sometimes neurotic part come from?
Because the most powerful conditioner isn't reward, it's actually the threat of punishment. Skinner noticed something really crucial here.
Which was?
When a person is under threat of punishment, they don't just stop doing the thing that gets punished. Instead, they learn these often complex, sometimes pretty desperate ways to avoid the punishment itself.
So the main goal isn't good behavior, it's just successful avoidance.
Exactly. That's the core motivation.
So, if I got yelled at for speaking up as a kid, my protector doesn't just learn silence, it develops a whole toolkit. People-pleasing, hiding what I really think, maybe withdrawing completely, all just ways to dodge that potential future pain. That avoidance is the skill.
You got it. Skinner called these sophisticated avoidance tricks the equivalent of Freudian dynamisms. They aren't really true choices. They're behaviors shaped entirely by escaping a threat.
Which totally shifts things from blaming some autonomous inner man who should just try harder.
Right, that outdated idea.
And puts the focus on the environment. And you said, for adults, we often create that environment ourselves.
That's the kicker. The protector is often responding to rules and conditions that you, maybe unconsciously, have already set up internally.
Wow, okay. So if I've set up an internal world that demands perfection, the protector will dutifully churn out perfectionism to avoid the punishment of feeling like a failure.
Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
It does. But that avoidance, even if it worked back then, it really limits life now. And I imagine trauma is like pouring concrete on these rigid internal structures.
Absolutely. Trauma is a huge factor. When we talk about trauma, it's not just about pain. It actually halts development in some ways.
Halts development. How so?
It can prevent certain mental capacities from fully forming. And this leads to this critical state where the person continues to act as if they're still in immediate danger, even when they're perfectly safe in the present.
So the lashing out, the trouble focusing, the
No.
difficulties in relationships, these aren't character flaws. They're behaviors that would make total sense in a dangerous situation that just isn't happening anymore.
Exactly. Their system is running on historical code. It's helpful to understand the actual physiology of it.
Okay.
The instinctual responses to life threat, fight, flight, freeze, they come from the oldest part of our brain, the reptilian complex.
Right.
Huge amounts of survival energy get mobilized.
Great. That adrenaline surge.
Yeah, massive energy. Trauma often happens when that survival energy gets blocked or thwarted. The person couldn't fight, couldn't flee, couldn't complete the defense.
So where does all that pent-up energy go? It has to go somewhere.
It doesn't just vanish, it often gets turned inward.
Hmm.
contained, internalized. Instead of acting out, people might start acting in to control this huge undischarged energy.
Acting in, like self-harm.
It can manifest that way, or through intense self-criticism, chronic tension, psychosomatic symptoms. It's tragically a form of self-violence, using internal force to keep the lid on that potential explosion.
And this acting in then fuels the avoidance. The protector shrinks the person's life to avoid triggering that stored energy.
Precisely. Think about someone who becomes reluctant to drive after a bad accident, or someone whose interest in intimacy plummets after experiencing flashbacks. The protector limits life, because limitation feels safer than risking activation.
Wow. It's like containment becomes the primary goal, even over quality of life.
Often, yes. Society sometimes subtly prefers this, because internal containment looks controlled from the outside. It maintains a facade of stability, even if the individual is suffering immensely inside. The protector sacrifices thriving for the appearance of surviving.
This makes it sound like our conscious willpower isn't really in the driver's seat most of the time. It's these deeper, involuntary physiological systems constantly scanning for risk.
Which brings us perfectly to neuroception. That's the term Dr. Stephen Porges coined in his polyvagal theory.
Neuroception.
It's exactly that. Your nervous system's continuous unconscious evaluation of risk and safety. It happens below thought. Before you even feel scared, your body's already deciding. Connect, mobilize, or shut down.
So my body picks the strategy before my conscious mind even labels the feeling. How does that system work? What are the options?
It's hierarchical. Three main adaptive circuits that get triggered based on that neuroceptive scan.
Okay, what's the top level?
The highest, most preferred state is the safe context. When neuroception detects safety, maybe through friendly faces, a calm tone of voice, gentle touch, it activates the social engagement system.
That's the smart vagus you mentioned.
Yes, the ventral vagal complex. It actively inhibits the older defense circuits, allowing us to connect, feel calm, be curious. That's our state for thriving.
Where the protector can relax a bit. But what if the scan picks up danger?
If the environment shifts to a danger context, think loud noises, sudden movements, an angry expression, even just a threatening memory popping up, the smart vagus dials back. The system then activates the sympathetic nervous system.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. Immediate mobilization. Heart races, muscles tense, ready for action, classic anxiety response. The protector says, get ready.
And what if the threat feels overwhelming? Like fight or flight isn't possible or won't work? What's the last resort?
Then the system shifts down again into the oldest, most primitive strategy, the life threat context. This is governed by the dorsal vagal complex. It triggers immobilization, freeze.
Collapse, numbness.
Yes. Dissociation, feeling unreal, shutting down. Metabolism slows way down. It's a primal survival strategy. Play dead, conserve resources. Maybe the threat will pass, or at least minimize the pain.
Okay, this is crucial. So the protector part, that habit we might hate, that pattern we judge, it's directly wired into this physiological hierarchy.
Absolutely. If your body is chronically neurocepting danger, whether from outside or from internal memories or sensations, the protector's job is crystal clear, even if primitive. Keep the system mobilized in sympathetic activation, or keep it shut down in dorsal vagal freeze.
It's not being malicious. It's running an ancient survival program it believes is necessary.
Based on its assessment of the environment, yes. Highly successful at its perceived job, even if that job is based on outdated information.
Okay, so the body's survival system lays down the initial track for the protective behavior, maybe procrastination, to avoid performance anxiety. But that habit needs fuel to keep going, right? The mind has to justify it somehow.
Precisely. The protector's first job might be physical survival or avoiding immediate threat, but its second, almost equally powerful job is maintaining psychological coherence.
Coherence, meaning?
Meaning making it all make sense inside. If you're going to keep doing something that on some level you know isn't great for you, your cognitive system has to create a story, a rationalization that explains why it's necessary, or okay, or maybe even the smart thing to do.
And this is where cognitive dissonance comes in. Leon Festinger's work.
The absolute cornerstone of understanding how we maintain internal consistency. Festinger showed that we have this powerful drive for our beliefs and actions to line up. When there's inconsistency or dissonance, it creates this really uncomfortable psychological tension.
Like an internal alarm bell going off.
Exactly. And we are intensely motivated, almost wired, to reduce that discomfort, to make the alarm stop.
Okay, let's use an example. Let's say I deeply believe I'm a diligent, focused person. That's my self-concept.
Okay.
But my protector part keeps making me scroll social media for hours instead of starting that important project. That's the action. Big mismatch, right?
Mhm.
So major internal discomfort. How does the system, the protector's cognitive helper, fix that dissonance?
Right, so the system immediately goes into dissonance reduction mode. Now, the most direct way, which is admitting my belief about myself was wrong, I wasn't focused, that's usually the most painful and the least likely route.
Avoid it at all costs.
Pretty much. So instead, the protector gets busy changing the other cognitions around the action. First, it might reframe the scrolling.
How?
You know what? I really needed that downtime. I was on the edge of burnout. That scrolling was actually crucial mental decompression. It proves I'm committed to my long-term well-being. See?
Uh-huh. Minimize the negative of the procrastination. Maximize some invented positive of the avoidance. Clever.
Very. Or, second option, change the cognition about the alternative, the project itself.
Like,
Actually, that project wasn't that important anyway. Or, the deadline was totally unrealistic. Or, my boss doesn't appreciate my work, so why bother? Anything to reduce the value of the thing you avoided.
so the protector weaves these rationalizations to shield the ego from feeling bad, from regret, from admitting failure.
Exactly. It's why people often dig their heels in after making a bad decision, like buying something ridiculously expensive.
Oh yeah, they become its biggest advocate.
Because they've invested too much psychologically to admit it was a mistake. They have to convince themselves it was brilliant to reduce the dissonance. It's all about protecting that self-image.
And this kind of necessary self-deception. This ties into what Dan Ariely called the fudge factor.
Beautifully, yes. Ariely pointed out this constant balancing act we do. We have two conflicting desires pulling at us all the time.
Which are?
One, we desperately want to look ourselves in the mirror and feel like good, moral, worthy people.
Okay, the desire for a positive self-view.
And two, we also kind of want to benefit from, let's be honest, selfish behavior sometimes. Cutting corners, maybe a little white lie, avoiding effort, getting ahead slightly unfairly.
Uh-huh. The pull towards self-interest.
So the fudge factor is that sweet spot the protector finds.
Yeah.
It allows us to cheat or slack off just by a little bit, enough to get the benefit, but not so much that we cross our own internal moral line and start feeling genuinely bad about ourselves.
So we get the cookie, but we still feel like a decent person.
That's the goal. And it's much easier to manage this, Ariely found, when the action is further removed from actual concrete money.
How so?
Think about it. Someone who would never dream of physically stealing cash from someone's wallet might find it much easier to rationalize fudging numbers on an expense report or taking office supplies home.
Because it's more abstract, less direct harm perceived.
Exactly. It's easier to label it differently. Creative accounting, not stealing. Borrowing a pen, not theft. That label change is the protector's dissonance reduction in action. It makes the self-serving behavior feel acceptable.
And this applies directly to habits. Having one more drink becomes self-medicating my stress, which sounds way better than I'm using alcohol to numb out because I can't handle my feeling.
Perfect example. The protector is a master linguist when it comes to reframing. It's crucial self-management to maintain that sense of internal okayness.
Okay, so this relentless drive to protect the ego from pain, from dissonance, from regret. This leads us to another interesting protector strategy. Regret aversion, especially in maximizers.
Ah, yes, the maximizer versus satisficer distinction. It's really relevant here.
I always thought being a maximizer, always striving for the absolute best option, was a good thing, like ambition.
It can start there, but it often morphs into a desperate protective stance against feeling regret later. The maximizer feels compelled to research every single option, weigh every pro and con, invest enormous energy to ensure they pick the objectively best thing.
Sounds exhausting.
It often is. And they're highly prone to regret and, research shows, often less happy with their choices, even if those choices are technically better.
Compared to the satisficer.
Right. The satisficer just looks for an option that's good enough. They have their criteria, they find something that meets them, and they stop searching. Done.
So why does the maximizer suffer more?
Because they combine super high expectations with taking intense personal responsibility if they fail to meet them. Even a slightly suboptimal outcome feels like a personal failure.
Creating constant disappointment.
Relentless disappointment, often. So that drive to make the absolute best choice isn't just ambition. It's often fueled by the protector trying desperately to prevent the future pain of thinking, oh no, what if I'd chosen the other thing?
The anxiety of what if becomes overwhelming.
Totally. It's the tyranny of choice. The protector, trying to prevent future regret, ends up manufacturing crushing anxiety and paralysis now. It's another sophisticated form of avoidance, avoiding the potential pain of a wrong choice.
Wow. And if that defense fails, if we do make a mistake, feel regret, fall short, what's the protector's final weapon?
Then we often meet the internalized critic, armed with its most powerful tool, shame.
Ugh, shame. Brené Brown talks about this so much. That feeling of being fundamentally flawed.
Exactly, that intensely painful belief that deep down we're inadequate, unworthy of love, just not good enough.
And she says shame loves perfectionists.
It really does, because perfectionism gives shame constant fuel. It keeps the person hyper-focused on external appearances, on seeming just right, terrified of being exposed as flawed.
And when they inevitably fail to meet those impossible standards.
Standards often set by the protector itself to avoid external judgment.
Right.
The resulting self-contempt is devastating. It's perhaps the most painful form of self-punishment, that internal voice tearing you down, ultimate self-violence.
And then according to social learning theory, we get really good at developing cognitive tricks to try and bridge that gap between the protector's impossible standards and our actual messy human behavior.
It becomes this closed loop. High standards, inevitable failure, intense shame and self-contempt, frantic rationalization, maybe doubling down on the standards. It's exhausting and deeply punitive.
So the way out can't possibly be more self-criticism or punishment?
Absolutely not. The only way forward is to fundamentally change the internal environment. We have to shift from that punitive, critical atmosphere towards one built on boundaries, accountability, and radical acceptance. That's what opens the door for genuine self-compassion.
And that shift, that's the beginning of integration, getting these parts to work together instead of against each other.
That's the goal.
Okay, making that leap from self-punishment to acceptance and compassion sounds, well, huge, maybe the hardest part. How do you even begin to negotiate with a part of yourself that seems to only understand fear and control?
It really requires changing the whole internal operating system, shifting the leadership style inside, you could say, moving from what some call an attrition model to a developmental model.
Attrition versus developmental, what's the difference?
The attrition model, think of old school boot camp maybe, uses fear and harsh critique to enforce standards. The idea is to weed out the weak, leaving only the survivors who can take the punishment. Lots of internal critics operate this way.
Okay, I recognize that voice. So what's the developmental model look like, applied internally?
You still have high standards. That doesn't change. But the approach to meeting them is totally different. Instead of punishing failure, you praise effort. You focus on the learning process.
So it's less about the outcome, more about the trying.
Exactly. It's about building grit, resilience, acknowledging that mistakes aren't signs of worthlessness, they're just data. Essential data points for figuring out what works.
So when the system messes up, instead of the internal leader or critic screaming, "You idiot,"
Right.
the developmental leader says,
Something like, okay, that approach didn't get us there. Interesting. What did we learn from that? What felt hard? All right, let's regroup and try something else. It's about nurturing the part that tried, offering support, not condemning the part that fell short.
that sounds much nicer. But how do we install that, especially if the system's been running on fear for decades? Self-compassion feels like the key, but, people worry it's just letting yourself off the hook. Laziness.
That's a common misconception. Self-compassion isn't passive self-indulgence at all. It's an active, trainable practice. And crucially, it involves both strength and tenderness. We need to integrate two forms, tender compassion and fierce compassion.
Okay, intriguing. Break those down for us. Tender compassion first, applied internally.
Tender compassion is about extending that kindness, warmth, and understanding to ourselves, especially when we're suffering or feel like we've failed. It's recognizing pain is just part of being human, something we all share.
So when that protector part is freaking out after I messed up.
Tender compassion is the internal voice saying, ouch, this really hurts right now. It makes sense that you feel bad. I'm here with you in this pain. It's okay. It's basically how you'd respond to a good friend who is suffering.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's fierce compassion then? That sounds different.
It is. Fierce compassion is active, is protective. It's about taking action to alleviate suffering, setting boundaries, motivating change, demanding justice, even internally.
Whoa, okay, give me an internal example. How does fierce compassion sound inside my head?
Let's say that internal critic launches a shame attack after you procrastinated. You're worthless. You always do this.
Yeah, familiar territory.
Fierce compassion steps right in, draws a line, and says something like, "Stop, Uppy. I understand you're trying to motivate me using fear and shame because that's what you know, but this level of self-contempt is harmful and unacceptable. You need to stop speaking to me like that right now. I need protection from you."
Wow, that's powerful. It's like using that protective energy, the same energy the protector uses against outside threats, but turning it inward to shield yourself from your own internal attacks.
You got it. It's like Martin Luther King Jr. said about love needing justice. Internally, compassion needs boundaries and protection too.
It leverages our natural empathy
Yeah, that ability to sense distress via mirror neurons, which is key for cooperation.
and just turns it inward, responding to our own pain with both understanding and protection so we don't get swamped by shame or stress.
Exactly. It's essential for resilience.
Okay, so with that compassionate foundation starting to build, then we can maybe start reprogramming the habits themselves. James Clear talks about a simple language shift here.
Ah, yes, the classic have to versus get to shift. It sounds small, but it's incredibly potent.
Why? What does it do?
It instantly reframes the behavior. Have to implies obligation, burden, external force. It invites resistance, especially from protective parts that hate being controlled.
Right, like, ugh, I have to wake up early for that awful project. Bread sets in immediately.
Exactly. But shifting it to, I get to wake up early to work on this project that moves my goals forward.
Suddenly it's an opportunity, a privilege.
It frames it as a choice, an internal motivation.
Yeah.
You're tapping into autonomy. If the protector feels forced, it digs its heels in. If it feels it's choosing something that offers potential growth or aligns with values, it's much more likely to become a collaborator.
That makes total sense. And this idea of collaboration leads to needing better internal communication, right? It
Yeah.
sounds like applying conflict resolution skills,
Yeah,
but inside our own heads.
absolutely. Conflict, even internal conflict between parts, isn't bad. It's just data. It signals that needs aren't being met somewhere. So yeah, we can use principles from healthy external conflict resolution internally.
Like what?
Like what? Attack the problem, the behavior, the unmet need, not the part. Don't label the protector bad. Take turns listening. Really try to hear each part's perspective. Summarize the other part's view to make sure it feels heard and understood. And then, crucially, agree on a small experiment moving forward.
Okay, let's make that concrete. Say I've got part A, the binge eating protector, and part B, the health advocate part. Constant war inside. How do they take turns?
Okay, so part B, the health advocate, might start, okay, listen, I really want to feel energetic and good in my body, but when I feel stressed or see certain foods, I just panic, and this urge to binge feels totally overwhelming.
Okay, stating its need and experience, then part A.
Part A, the binge protector, might respond, okay, I hear that you feel panic and overwhelm. My only job, the one I've always had, is to stop that pain immediately. When you're highly stressed, food is the fastest, most reliable way I know to shut down that awful feeling. It works instantly.
Then the health advocate summarizes.
Yeah. Okay, binge protector. So I'm hearing that your intention isn't to wreck my health. Your core mission is actually to protect me from feeling overwhelmed by stress. And binging is just the tool you learn that works fast. Is that right?
Validation, feeling heard. That's huge.
Huge. Then you move to boundaries and requests. Boundaries are about your own behavior. I will not engage in hateful self-talk. Requests invite change from the other part.
So using that script you mentioned,
Right. It might sound like, okay, binge protector. When X happens, I feel intense stress. I feel Y, overwhelmed and panicky. I need Z to feel some sense of relief and control. I understand you use food for that. Could we try an experiment? For the next week, when that feeling hits, could we try A, doing 5 minutes of intense exercise or deep breathing first before resorting to food, and just see if that helps you feel safe and helps me feel relief? We can check back in next Monday.
so you're not demanding it stop its job. You're acknowledging its need, validating its purpose, and offering it a potential new strategy to try, giving it some autonomy in the process.
Exactly. You're inviting collaboration by honoring its protective intent while negotiating the method. It feels respected, less threatened, and more willing to try something new because it feels like a choice, something it gets to do, not something it's forced to do.
All right, so we've identified the protector, started treating it with some compassion, both tender and fierce, and begun negotiating using autonomy and clear requests. What's the final step? Getting it to actually change its job description.
That's the goal. Negotiating a completely new role. Moving towards real integration. And this often starts by digging even deeper, looking beneath the surface conflict.
Deeper how?
John Gottman, the relationship researcher, talks about finding the dream within the conflict when couples have gridlocked issues. We can apply that internally.
The dream within the conflict.
Yeah, that surface behavior, the destructive habit, the rigid pattern, is just a symptom. The dream is the deeper core positive need or value that the protective behavior is desperately, if clumsily, trying to honor or achieve. High-level stuff.
Like what kind of dreams?
Maybe it's a profound need for a sense of order in a world that once felt terrifyingly chaotic. That could be the dream behind impulsive cleaning. Or maybe it's a deep longing for unconditional freedom, an escape from feeling trapped. That could be the dream behind chronic commitment phobia. Or a desperate need for safety and security driving intense risk aversion.
Okay, see, the behavior is problematic, but the underlying dream or need is often valid, even beautiful.
Exactly. So, negotiating a new role means you have to respect that underlying dream. You validate the protector's commitment to, say, freedom, but then you work with it to find new, healthier, more adaptive ways to express and experience that freedom. Ways that don't involve sabotaging relationships or running away.
So, I honor your dedication to keeping me safe, security protector. Thank you. Now let's find ways to feel secure that don't involve shutting down all new experiences.
That's integration in action. But getting there requires tremendous courage. It means voluntarily facing the very things the protector has spent years helping you avoid. Facing the unknown.
Which Jordan Peterson calls facing the anomaly.
Right. The protector's prime directive is predictability. Keep things known, stable, safe, even if that safety is a present. Avoiding the anomaly, the new information, the scary feeling, the confrontation with the pattern is basically choosing stagnation over growth. It's opposing adaptation.
So how do we override that?
By making a conscious choice. When we avoid something and say, oh, I can't handle public speaking, that's too scary for me, we define ourselves by that limitation. We reinforce the small, rigid self the protector built.
But if we choose to face it?
The very act of voluntarily approaching that internal chaos, that fear, and labeling it as tolerable, even if difficult, that act redefines the self. It says, I am the kind of being who can tolerate this. It's an act of faith in your own capacity. That is courage.
So we shift the goalposts. Instead of life being about maintaining predictable safety.
Which is an illusion anyway.
Right. It becomes about developing a self that is capable of navigating chaos and uncertainty voluntarily. The protector's old job was, keep the world safe. The integrated self's new stance is, I am capable, even when the world isn't safe.
Beautifully put. And this journey towards wholeness, towards embracing all these parts, connects directly to Carl Jung's idea of individuation.
Becoming a psychological individual, right? Whole, not divided.
Exactly. A separate, indivisible whole. Jung has said this requires consciously connecting the life of the past, all those deep archetypal patterns, including the protector's whole history and original purpose, with the life of the present, our current reality and values.
We have to acknowledge how the past lives within us through these parts.
Yes. We have to accept that these unconscious processes have been driving our behavior through these protectors, even if our conscious ego didn't understand why.
And Jung warned, if we fail to make that connection, if we leave these protectors operating in the shadows, unacknowledged,
we end up with what he called a rootless consciousness, a fragmented self, highly suggestible, prone to neurosis, tossed around by external trends because it lacks deep internal roots and coherence. The isolated protector reinforces that fragmentation.
So healing means bringing it into the light, recognizing its wisdom, even if its methods are outdated.
Seeing it as a manifestation of deep, necessary, historical wisdom that just needs updating and integrating.
So what's the force that ultimately holds all this together, that guides the newly integrated system?
Ultimately, it comes down to meaning, personal meaning. Viktor Frankl taught us this so powerfully. It's not about some grand, abstract meaning of life. It's about finding the specific, unique meaning of your life right now, in this moment.
And how does meaning help with internal conflict?
When you're clear on your why, your core values, your purpose, what truly matters to you, it provides compass. The conflicts between the protector wanting safety and the aspirational part wanting growth start to resolve because they can align under that larger purpose. The purpose helps negotiate the trade-offs.
And Jonathan Haidt adds that final piece about how this feels, right? Happiness isn't something you chase directly.
No, he says happiness is found between. It arises when you get the conditions right.
And a key internal condition is
coherence, harmony, alignment between the different parts and levels of your personality. It's not about destroying the protector, that autonomous inner man demanding rigid compliance. It's about rewriting his job description
So he steps down from being the isolated warden.
and becomes part of an integrated team, operating within a stable internal environment you've consciously created, guided by your values, while still honoring those ancient, valid needs for safety and survival it always carried. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, that is such a profound shift in perspective. We started by really accepting this radical idea that our most frustrating, destructive habits are often logical, maybe maladaptive, but logical survival strategy.
hmm Rooted in everything from basic conditioning and trauma responses to our nervous system's constant safety checks through neuroception, and even our deep psychological need to maintain cognitive coherence.
Yeah, we saw how cognitive dissonance and that fudge factor create the psychological armor to keep the protector strategies going, even when they hurt us.
And crucially, that the way forward isn't more self-attack, but shifting from that fear-based attrition model to a developmental one inside. Fostering real self-compassion is key.
Using both that tender compassion to soothe the pain.
And that fierce compassion to set firm boundaries against the inner critic and demand better treatment for ourselves.
And then finally, integration isn't about getting rid of the protector. It's about meeting it with curiosity, finding that dream within the conflict, the deep positive need it's trying to serve.
And then negotiating a new collaborative role for that part, respecting its history, but updating its function for your current life.
Okay, so for our final provocative thought this week, something for you to really sit with. If you start to define yourself not by your fears, but as the agent capable of voluntarily tolerating internal and external chaos, what past fear, what old internal protector inside you might now be ready to finally step down from its exhausting role as a hypervigilant guardian?
And what new collaborative role, drawing on its underlying strength, maybe its loyalty, its vigilance turned into discernment, its intensity turned into passion, could it take on as part of your integrated self? Remember, the goal isn't abolishing parts of yourself, but ending the rigid isolation of those parts, creating instead an integrated self, guided by meaning, within an internal environment of your own making.